Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Healing Brain. This is our weekly webinar and podcast here at Doman International, where parents join from around the world and ask us their biggest and most important questions about their children with special needs. And we do our very best to give the parents practical and helpful recommendations to boost the development of those children and accomplish the impossible. Well, in today's session, I'm going to be tackling a topic that I talked about a few months ago, but I recently got a request to discuss it again from a parent who felt it was very important. They really wanted me to go into more depth on this topic, and especially so that they could share the information with other family members and friends who interact with their special needs child. And so the topic we're going to be talking about today is how to speak to your child with special needs for maximum cognitive development. You know, I often tell parents that the most important thing you can do for your child's cognitive development is alter and enhance the way you talk to your child. And I think that surprises many parents. They don't expect that the way that they talk to their kid has a huge impact on the child's comprehension and speaking vocabulary and academic skills. And so I think tackling the subject and going into more depth is going to be, hopefully helpful for many, many parents out there. So I've got 10 different things that parents can do to help enhance their child's cognitive development. So I'll be going through these one by one. So the first thing is it's very important, especially if you have a young child. And by the way, all of these recommendations apply both to children with special needs, but also neurotypical children as well. The number one thing that you could do with a young child, which would be very helpful, is to label people, places, and things in the environment and describe them in specificity. So what this means is, if I have a 9-month-old baby in my hands, right, one of the easiest things you can do with that baby or that young child is walk around and just tell them what things are. So if you saw me with a child, I'd be saying things like, oh, look, there's the lamp. Do you want to touch the lamp? And maybe they touch the lamp, but I say, very good. All right, let's walk over here. Oh, there's the keyboard. Look at the keyboard. Do you want to hit the keys? And so I tell the child what it is. I might explain a little bit about it. I might say, oh, look at the piano keys. They're white and black, right? So I might describe colors. I might describe what it's for, right? I might say, oh, the piano's for making music. Or if we're looking at the lamp, I'll say, oh, the lamp can turn on and off here. You want to pull the string? Look, it turns on, it turns off. So you label the items in the environment and you describe them in specificity. You can also do this with people, right? You can say, look, it's Aunt Sally. Aunt Sally's here to visit you. Isn't that nice? So you, again, tell your child what things are in the environment and tell them about it. It's something which is very easy even to do with a child who doesn't speak, because it doesn't really require them to say anything back to you or interact or have a back and forth conversation. All they have to do is listen. And it's a great way to provide a child with stimulation, and it requires absolutely no preparation of any kind. And by the way, a lot of children greatly enjoy it, and some children will just be riveted as you walk through and label things in the environment. I've had many children who are crying and upset, and I just pick them up and start telling them, about things in the room, and they quiet down and they stop crying because they're like, oh, something interesting to pay attention to. It's just a great way to get started. All right. Well, before we get into number 2, I see I have Colleen Hudson here. Hi, Colleen.
Hello. How are you?
Very good. Joining us from Europe.
Yes, it's true.
All right. So for everyone who's joining late, we are talking today about, what are things that parents can do when they speak to their child with special needs to maximize their child's cognitive development, their understanding, their speech development, their comprehension. And I think many parents expect me when they ask this kind of question, how can I maximize my child's cognitive development? I think they sometimes expect me to say, do reading or do a math program. Those are incredibly important as well. But I find that the first thing we need to address is the way we speak to the child. And so hopefully these recommendations will be helpful. So the second thing, and for those of you who follow us regularly, this probably won't be a big surprise, but it's really important to read books to your child and to do it consistently. And I recommend not using baby books, but providing your child constantly with new content. This doesn't mean if your child has a favorite book, you need to throw it away. Of course not. I love it when children like books and they want to hear them again and again. But some children, they learn to love one book and that's all they'll ask for. And they don't, for that reason, parents don't provide them with new books. And if they were provided with new books, they'd fall in love with those books too. So I highly recommend considering reading your child nonfiction, because I think a lot of parents of young children think, oh, I'll read fiction, storybooks. And stories are great, of course, and they expose the child to ideas and helps grow their imagination and it helps grow their vocabulary. But a lot of parents don't realize how interested their children are in nonfiction. Interestingly, with children with special needs, we found 90% when we provide them with books prefer nonfiction over fiction, which I think stuns a lot of parents. But they tend to be very information seeking and they love to learn about new things, animals, space, different kinds of jobs, different places in the world. And a lot of parents just don't realize, and I always say to parents, you have nothing to lose by picking up a book and reading it to your child, right? Only things to gain. All right. Well, by the way, I've got 10 things, so I'm going to move quickly through them. The point number 3 is tell your child a story. This is a very easy thing to do. Again, please note that the first 3 things we've discussed today, none of them require a child to talk, right? So we talked about labeling things. We talked about reading a book to your child. Third, tell your child a story. This could be a story about something you experienced. It could be a story from a book or a movie that you like, right? Stories are a great way to entertain children, to provide them with stimulating information. It's also a good way to keep children's mind off of something. I used to, when I did a physical program with my next door neighbor, this was a girl who had learning difficulties, reading and math learning problems, and her family were doing a Doman Method program with her. Her mom would read us a book as we did Crawling and Creeping, which is a Doman Method program for children with her specific challenges. This is back when I was maybe 8 years old, something like that. And so being read a story or told a story as we were doing it took our minds off of it. And we often forgot we were doing physical activity because we were so engrossed in the story. My dad, who coached me and my siblings to do aerobic running, would often tell us stories, as we were running. And it was just a great way to again, keep us entertained and teach us new things. When we didn't even realize he was trying to keep our mind off of the physical activity. He didn't tell me until later when I was an adult. That's why he told us stories. So it's a great way to stimulate kids and, and teach them new things. Okay. For everyone who is joining us late, we are discussing what are, basically my top 10 recommendations for parents when they speak to their child with special needs to maximize the child's cognitive development. And as I was saying before, we talked about this a few months ago, but a family came to me recently and they said, look, we talk to our child in a stimulating way, but we want something to send to our family to show them how to help their child. So I said, okay, I'll make this video, and that way parents everywhere can just not just watch it themselves, but also share it with other family members. So now we're on point number 4. This is similar to labeling. You can simply describe events as they're happening, right? So you're with your child, you're out for a walk, and you say, oh, look at that. You see that man over there, and he's walking, his dog. and oh, look at that dog. That dog is red. Isn't that dog cute? So you just describe things as they're happening right in front of your child. Uh, Children love to be told what is happening. They love to be oriented and told what's going on. It makes them feel more comfortable and safe, kind of like, okay, everything that's happening here is predictable, is good, is safe. And it puts a lot of children at ease. And it also helps them kind of tune in to what is going on, right? Because we shouldn't assume a young child or a child with special needs may understand what is happening. And so describing for them what's going on can be very helpful and stimulating. Okay, now we're on to point number 5. I love this point because it's something my grandfather taught that I had completely forgotten about until a mom on Instagram reminded me of it. And that is to give 3 more facts when answering questions or preparing your child for something than you would have otherwise. So, for example, if your child comes to you and says, "Hey, mommy, what's for dinner?" Right? You could easily say chicken, right? And that's one piece of information. But you could also give additional pieces of information along with that, right? You could say, "Oh, we're going to do we're going to do chicken with rice, and for vegetables, we're going to have broccoli, right? And I'm going to roast the chicken in the oven. Okay, that'll take about 15 minutes, right? And then Daddy's coming home and Lisa, and then all of us will eat together, right? So you could just answer chicken to that question, or you could answer with all of that information. And it's like, why not provide more information if you can, right? There's only something to benefit from that. By the way, when you do this, not only does it help cognitively enhance the child, I often find when children are prepared for things, they're more engaged. They know what's going to happen. They're more interested because now everything isn't a surprise for them. So, just whenever your child asks a question, just give 3 more pieces of information than you would otherwise. Or if you want to prepare them for something, give them 3 more facts, right? So, for example, let's even take a child who doesn't speak, right? You could say, "Hey, Michael, we're going to a wedding today," right? Okay, that's one piece of information. Or you could say, "Hey, Michael, we're going to a wedding today, and you're going to see the groom, and the groom's going to be dressed in a tuxedo. He's going to have a black bow tie on with a jacket. He's going to look really good. And the bride is going to be wearing white, right? She's going to have a white dress on. And there are going to be, 200 people there, and we're going to the church. And in the church, it's really important that we're quiet, right? We can't talk when we're in the church, right? So again, you're starting at the same point, but one parent is just giving one fact, the other parent's giving a lot of facts. It's a great way to engage a child from a intellectual stimulation standpoint. So those are points 1 through 5. Colleen, any before I go through 6 through 10, any thoughts that you have?
Just that it works. I definitely did this when my daughter was small, and sometimes people would ask, why are you narrating everything? And I said, well, how else is she supposed to learn? As you said, Spencer, little kids don't know these things because they haven't been through them before, or, it's a good opportunity to expand our vocabulary also. I always made sure to use fairly sophisticated words so that she would learn.
Yeah, you're right, Colleen. There are some people who just actively. There are some people who have never thought to talk to children in this way, and that's perfectly understandable. But then there are some people who kind of actively speak against it in some way. I had this a bit when I was speaking to a nephew, and someone said, "Why are you talking to him like he's 20 years old? He's only 2." And I said, "Sorry, like this is just the way we do things." But I found that it really helps. It doesn't just help children with their behavior. I genuinely believe it creates a child who is more mature and confident in themselves
Yes.
because they've been prepared for things.
Yes, and they're not talked down to. I had Olivia at the park one time. She was about 3 years old, and there were a whole bunch of geese out, and one of them came at her because she had a piece of bread in her hand that wasn't intended for the goose. She was eating it, but the goose comes at her, and I said, "Oh," I said, this Canada goose is getting a little aggressive. Let's give him his space. We're going to go over here." And there was a grandmother there, and she said, "Wow, you're really talking to her, like she's older." And I thought, "Oh, I didn't," and I said, I didn't realize. And she said, "Was that a mean bird?"
Yeah.
And I thought, no, the bird wasn't mean. That's not even accurate.
Yeah.
You're not really, the bird is not, it's being a bird. It
Yeah.
wants the bread. Also, the bird has a name. So it was such a classic example. I thought, wow, this is really funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And children sense it when they're getting talked down to, just like everyone does, and no one likes to, one of the best ways, actually, if you want someone to behave immaturely, the best way is to talk down to them. It's like we've all had that experience before where you walk into a store or someone, or you walk into a place and someone talks down to you. And your first thought is, I should just smack them in the face, or you know what, I should just scream at you. And most of us don't, because we're mature adults living in society, but it brings out the worst in us. And with children, it brings out the worst in them when they feel like, oh, this person is speaking in a condescending way, speaking down to me. Maybe I should just make them pay. And unfortunately, a lot of kids do that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, now we're going back to 10 things that you can do to maximize your child's cognitive development when speaking to them, especially with children with special needs, although this applies to all kids. And I said that the next thing is just to recap past experiences. Sometimes it might be tough for you to think of something to talk about with your child, especially if your child doesn't have a lot of speech. One thing you can just do is recap a past experience. Say, hey, remember last Saturday, we went to Lisa's birthday party, and remember we gave Lisa those crayons that she's always wanted, and she drew that picture of the cat. So you recap a past experience for your child. By the way, it's good for a child's memory. It's good for them to for retention, to bring back past memories. But also it's just a great way to a good way to basically tell a child a story about the past in a stimulating way. And then along those lines, preparing your child for the future. I used the example before of how you can, when telling your child about something that's coming up, like a wedding, how you can give your child a lot of information. When you prepare your child for a future event, first of all, your child will enjoy it much more. Colleen and I actually used to teach young children, basically from, these were kids, learning with the Doman Method from birth to 14 years of age. We had a classroom setting where these kids came in with their parents. And what we found very quickly is that when children were prepared for a field trip before they went on it, they got so much more out of it when they went. I remember one time where we brought the children on a field trip to a historic home in Philadelphia, where we both work. And the tour guide was used to giving tours to children. It was a historic place. But at the end of the tour, he said to Colleen and I, like, what have you done with these kids? Because he just wasn't used to having children asking engaging questions. Kids riveted as he was talking, asking really good questions. And it's because probably most children that walk into that historic home know nothing about it. So when they walk in, oh, what's this house? But the students that were with us, we had prepared them about it in advance. So when children are prepared, they're much more interested in what they're doing. And also they just tend to behave much more maturely as well, because now they're interested and engaged. And so the last thing they want to do is throw a temper tantrum and, be whisked away and lose this experience. So it's very helpful for kids' behavior as well. All right. Well, if we go to number 8, something else you can do, and you might have picked up on this as I was giving examples, is to speak as specifically as possible, right? So one quick example is like, instead of saying to your child, look at the doggy, saying, look at the Siberian Husky. So be as specific as possible. Why not? Colleen used the example of the woman saying, look, it's a mean bird, instead of saying it's a goose or it's a Canada goose, or being as specific as possible. And so, of course, none of us have all the information about everything, so we may not be able to be completely specific, but we can be as specific as we know, right, as the knowledge we have. And it's a great way to enhance a child's vocabulary, right? And by the way, it's a very it's something that you can often see with children, how specific their parents speak. Because Colleen, I have a Siberian Husky, as you know, and I'll walk around the neighborhood and I'll have I have some children who will just say, oh, look, it's a doggy, right? And then I'll have some children say, is that a wolf? So they don't even know it's a dog, which I understand. But then there are some children who go, oh, look, it's a Siberian Husky, right? That child was taught that by their parents. There's a 5-year-old is probably only going to know that if someone around them tells them those kinds of things. So anyway, again, a parent watching this may say, Spencer, I don't know what a Siberian Husky looks like. That's okay. You don't have to know everything, but there are certain things you do know, and be as specific as possible when talking to your child about those things. All right. Well, along those lines, it's really helpful to use synonyms to increase your child's vocabulary. It's a very good way to add specificity and grow a child's vocabulary, right? So you could point at something and say to your child, that's big, right? Or you could say, look, that's enormous. Or you could say, that's huge, or that's gigantic, or that's humongous, or that's colossal. So those are all synonyms of big or very big, right? And it's a great way to grow a child's vocabulary. By 18 months of age, they have shown, even by 18 months, that parents that use large vocabularies with their children, that their children have larger speaking vocabularies by 18 months, right? So, and you can imagine if there's already a difference by 18 months, how big of a difference is there going to be between, when the child is 6 years or 18? It's huge. So it's a really good way to, to help a child have a larger understanding and speaking vocabulary. Okay, and then last but not least, you can always tell your child about something you learned. So, Colleen, I have a funny story about this. Yesterday, I was speaking to a couple who they live in the Philadelphia area. They're friends of mine, and they learned about our program. They have a neurotypical child who's 4.5 months old, and a baby. And but they watched some of our online videos, and so they're doing a lot of our infant stimulation programs with their 4.5-month-old. And the mom loves history podcasts. And so the mom just talks to her 4-month-old about her history podcast. She said, I've talked to her all about the War of the Roses and the Byzantine Empire. And, and we were all laughing about it. Like, oh, isn't that funny? But she was also being entirely serious too. Like, she knows it's a funny thing. But because what she and her husband are focused on right now is, let's just build out a stimulating linguistic environment for our child, and the dad was telling me, he said, look, I know I'm biased, it's my child, but when I compare my 4-month-old to other friends 4-month-old, 3, 4, 5-month-olds, she's so much more engaged. Like, when people talk to her, she makes eye contact with them, she responds to what they're saying to her, while other babies are kind of people will try to engage with them and they're tuned out and disconnected. And so one great thing is to just teach your child about things you've learned. By the way, when parents talk to their kids about things that they're interested in, right? The parent is interested in, children tend to get interested in those things. If I look at a lot of my interests, I got a lot of them from my mom and dad. They're things they're interested in. They talked about it with me. I learned to love them, so we pick up on a lot of our interests from people, the adults around us when we're kids. So, I'm not a big car person, right? I'm not very interested in cars. My dad and mom don't really care about cars. My grandparents didn't care about cars. But my nephews, their dads care a lot about cars because their dad spoke to them about it, right? And now my nephews know about cars and I don't, right? So it's a great way to teach children things that they deserve and would love to know about. Colleen, any other thoughts? Those are the 10 things. Any other thoughts, Colleen, before we jump into other questions?
Just to say that it really does pay dividends down the road, in so many ways. When you get into the habit of having that kind of relationship with your child, it just continues. And in my experience now, I have that kind of relationship with my parents because they taught us, and it was became such a natural part of our lives that I still go to them with questions about things that I don't know, of course. And we're always sharing things with each other that we're interested in. Oh, I just read this book, it was so good, or I saw this great film. And the same thing goes for my daughter too, who's 21 now. Spencer, that she and I just took a little vacation together for a few days to Richmond, Virginia, where there's a lot of history. And, she's 21 and she has her own friends. It's not like I'm the only person she hangs out with. But she likes to go on these trips. She's a museum person. She, is always finding interesting things wherever she goes. And her friends have remarked on that too, that she's always interested in different stuff. So I think it just something to keep in mind, for the long term, it just keeps on paying off.
Absolutely. So, Colleen, I know we've got some pre-submitted questions.
Yes.
I'll just answer one here from Falborg. My baby with Down syndrome is 6.5 months old and can hold his weight for 20 seconds with grasping. Wow, that's really, really good, by the way. Is he ready for vital release training? Can you show how to do it? Won't it interfere with his grasping? Okay, so
Spencer, one quick thing. I do want to say that this is Ella, and they are coming to see us in July in Italy. So she's doing a very, very good program already.
Perfect. Yeah, an amazing program. Yeah. So let me answer the last question first. Stimulating vital release, does it interfere with grasping? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And even if you think about an average 6.5 or 7-month-old child, they are both reaching out and grabbing objects, but also letting go of them. So training a release, the vital release for everyone who doesn't know is, when we touch something which is painful, we imagine for a second if someone pinches your hand, right? We have a reflexive ability to release and move away with our hand. And so, no, it doesn't interfere with grasping at all. They're two separate abilities. The one thing I will say is probably your 6.5-month-old probably already has a vital release. And it's something that's pretty simple to check, right? You can just have a child grasp your finger like this, and then you just do a little pinch of the palm like this. Okay, it doesn't have to be too much, just a little pinch. And you just see, does your child release the finger that they're holding? At 6.5 months, most children, even most children who have a neurodevelopmental delay, will have that. Okay. Now, if they don't, then yes, you could stimulate it. But one of the best ways to get a child to move up on the developmental profile, as you know, the grasp reflex is the first level in manual development. The second level is the vital release. One of the best ways to stimulate a child to move up the profile is to stimulate the level below it. So right now you're stimulating the grasp reflex, but when your baby holds for 20 seconds and holds, his body weight. So probably even in you doing the grasp reflex stimulation, it's probably advanced your baby's manual development quite far. So, for example, my first question for you would be, does your baby have a prehensile grasp? Meaning, does your child reach out and grab objects? That's the third level in manual development. It's above a vital release. I'd love to hear your answer. My guess is probably yes. So your child might be actually too advanced right now for vital release stimulation and may not need it because of all the hard work you've done.
That is.
Yeah. All right, Colleen, should we go to those pre-submitted questions?
Yes, please. So the first question that I have is from a mother that I spoke with earlier. Her daughter has intractable seizures right now. She has continual strep and infections, and she's and I mean a lot of other issues as well. So she knows that the program can be helpful for all of the other issues. She's wondering though if we have experience with intractable seizures and also addressing recurring infections, inflammations, and things like that.
Yeah, the answer is yes to both. When we look at intractable seizures, it reminds me of how, many parents, because the most common way seizures are treated by the medical establishment is through anticonvulsant medications. And, sometimes I was speaking to a family last week and they said, we were started on a medication. This was a family who was just starting the Doman Method. And our child continued to have breakthrough seizures. And the term breakthrough seizure was created by the pharmaceutical companies that create these anticonvulsant medications to say, well, it's a breakthrough seizure. It's such a powerful seizure. It's breaking through the medication. When the truth is the medication isn't working, right? It's not a breakthrough seizure. The medication isn't effective. And so, I suspect the same thing with intractable seizures or intractable epilepsy. What is often the case is it just means the standard medical treatment isn't working. And sadly, for a substantial portion of children with seizures, anticonvulsant medications do not eliminate the seizures. Some cases, they don't even reduce the seizures, and they often come with very difficult side effects. It's been shown that children tend to have slowed cognitive development and score lower even on IQ tests when they are on anticonvulsant medication. So it is problematic and often not helpful. So yes, absolutely, we have our two main ways of working on seizures is through our oxygenation program and through our nutrition and supplementation program. Let me talk about nutrition and supplementation first, because it also applies to this parent's other question about immunity. So the vast majority of children who come onto our program deal with frequent illnesses. Some children are chronically ill. And so one of the number one things we need to do for the Doman Method to be successful is get kids healthy. Because if a child isn't healthy, they can't do the Doman Method treatments we want them to do. So what we actually do first is we focus on a child's immunity and health. How can we get them healthy enough to do the program consistently? And of course, it's also very important for their long-term health and just quality of life. So what we do is we focus both on diet, but also adding supplements to strengthen immunity and strengthen brain function. So very often with diet and supplementation alone, we can often get changes, not just in health, but in the seizure situation. And then we also begin with our oxygenation program, which can help prevent seizures and sometimes even completely eliminate them. So we do these two things together, nutrition and oxygenation, in coordination with one another, and get really, really great results. So I think this child is a perfect candidate for our program, and I would definitely recommend for both the seizures and for health talking to Colleen.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I see that Ella has come back and said that he does grab objects.
Yes. Yeah. So, and he, by the way, that's great because grabbing objects is a 7-month-old level. So I think all of the manual development activities you've been doing are getting him advanced. So that's amazing. So I actually think for right now, Ella, all you have to do from a program standpoint, I don't think you have to stimulate the vital release. You can check it if you want and come back in another session and tell me how it goes, doing the evaluation I mentioned before. But for right now, the best thing you can keep doing is just continue the hanging with him. Yeah, that by far the best thing you can do for him.
Awesome. All right. The next question I have is from a father who said, and I am going to write to him as well to make sure that he gets our answer here. But he said, I have a child with learning difficulties. I'm interested in the Doman Method because I've read about it. Do you have any data on its effectiveness, statistics, research, publications?
Colleen, I missed the first sentence. Can you repeat it?
I'm so sorry. He said, I have a child with learning difficulties.
Yeah. So he's asking about statistics and results
Yes.
regarding that.
Of course.
So we publish our results online on our website with children with all kinds of developmental issues. And what I would point out is, some of the results that we publish are, for example, what percentage of children learn to read on our program. And that we call that a reading victory. So these are children who couldn't read before the program and now have demonstrated reading ability. We also have something called an understanding victory, which is, how many children were unable to follow instructions and understand sentences can now follow instructions and understand sentences. So we release the percentages of that. Our reading victory, the percentage goes up and down slightly, but it's always hovering around 95%. So 95% of children with special needs are learning to read on our program. And keep in mind that the vast majority of children we see have severe or profound developmental delays. And then the understanding victory is around 88, 89%, something like that. So the statistics in the cognitive areas are actually our best. The reason why we do best in cognitive development is because our learning pathways are the pathways carrying information into the brain. There are sensory pathways. So we learn by seeing, hearing, feeling, right? Our sensory abilities. So what we do with children is we do a lot of sensory stimulation to improve those pathways. So we do visual stimulation, auditory stimulation, tactile stimulation, so that information can be carried to their brain faster. And then we have teaching methods that involve very short sessions, which is important for kids who might have focus and concentration challenges. Very short teaching sessions that parents can do throughout the day. And we get really great results this way, great reading results, math results, academic results, foreign language results. And probably the Doman Method is best known for our reading and other cognitive programs. So I definitely think this dad is in the right place. He probably would find the book, The Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, interesting. Or if his child has like an autism or an ADHD diagnosis, the book Answering Autism might be the right book to start with. But the program can be incredibly helpful for kids with those kind of challenges.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Thank you. And well, there was one more question. This mother, Evelyn, is asking, how do they evaluate each child before building the program? Based on what? And I am going to be sending her the webinar that we did last year, is the Doman Method right for my family? Because you do talk about our developmental profile and how we go about evaluating, but maybe it would be helpful
Talk
to
a bit about that. Yeah. So when a family comes to our clinic, one of our worldwide clinics, the first thing that we do is we do something called the functional neurological evaluation, where we have the child run through different activities in front of us, and we observe, which of these important milestones the child has and which ones they don't have. And so what we have done, and this started with my grandfather, Glenn Doman, 70 years ago, is we use a tool called the developmental profile. The developmental profile measures what normal child development looks like in the first 6 years of life, and what are the major milestones that a child hits in the first 6 years of life. This is very important because there are developmental checklists that exist out in the world, but none of them are nearly as comprehensive or as well designed as the developmental profile. The developmental profile looks at the 6 most important areas of brain development for children, which are the 3 sensory areas: vision, hearing, and tactility, right? So seeing, hearing, feeling. And then the 3 motor areas, which are mobility, speech, and manual competence, the ability to use our hands. And so what we do with each child that comes to our offices is we evaluate them in these 6 areas. And it doesn't matter if it's a newborn baby who can't yet see and can't move or can't talk, or a child who is 12 years old and has mild learning challenges. Regardless of the child or adult's age or the severity of their issues, we can evaluate them with the developmental profile. And when we do that, it usually brings our attention, and just as importantly, parents' attention, to where that person or child has challenges, right? Very often we will find maybe certain reflexes aren't normal, even though it's an older child. Certain baby primitive reflexes are not yet fully functional. We'll find that basic movements, like the crawling movement on the belly or the creeping on hands and knees movement, are abnormal. We'll find a child's ability to visually track is poor. And so it helps us. It's helpful for parents to see where their child's underlying neurological problems are, but it's helpful for the staff because it shows us these are the areas, the foundational areas we need to stimulate with the child to get the brain functioning better in those abilities. And so it usually brings certain challenges to parents that were in parents' blind spots out into the open. And now we all know what we need to work on together. So after we've done that evaluation, we then design the child's program. We customize a program for the child that parents can carry out at home with their kid, and focused on those areas of the brain that have not developed normally. And then, of course, as those areas of the brain develop with the program, the symptoms start to go away, the symptoms that the child has, whether those are speech problems or learning difficulties or mobility issues or balance problems or auditory issues, whatever they may be, the symptoms can start to go away.
All right, great. It's very clear. Thank you.
Sure, of course. My pleasure.
I wonder, have you ever talked to any parent who really spoke about the differences between their evaluation with us and maybe other things that they had done in the past? Because in my experience, a lot of the families I talk to, have, of course, gone through the more conventional channels before they find us. And I know that when families work with us, they say that, we're so thorough. Our staff are so thorough. So I don't know if you know anything about how other places evaluate.
I think the first thing is because we use the developmental profile, and the profile itself is special because when parents look at it, they're like, this is a roadmap for what normal child development should look like. And that alone for parents is super meaningful because it lets them know not only where their child is, but where their child needs to get. So the profile alone is a huge, huge difference. But then also parents say, after we do the evaluation, we actually tell them about all of our findings. And that's very helpful because sometimes parents will bring their child to a doctor. The doctor will run through tests. never explain to parents what they're checking for or why they're checking it or what the findings are. They're kind of just told everything was normal or your child has autism or something like that, but not really told why were those tests specifically important and what were the findings. So after we do an evaluation with the child, we actually lead the parent through the profile and tell them everything they need to know about their child's development. The other thing that we do, which is a little different, is we listen to parents. So parents will sometimes say like, wow, this is the first time someone's actually ever asked me in-depth questions about my child's development. And I was speaking to one mom maybe 3 months ago, but she stuck with me because she said, this is the first organization that I've ever come to, or first, therapy or treatment place for my child, where I didn't have to explain everything to you about my child's medical history, because like when I walked in with the staff, first of all, they had already read the reports that we had submitted, but also you meaning our staff, already understood our child's challenges. She said it was the kind of thing, every person she walks into their office, she has to tell them her child's entire history so that they don't give bad recommendations, because she'll say very often she's been given recommendations in the past. She said, no, we can't do that because of this allergy he has or this thing in his medical history. And she says, that would have been devastating for my child's health if we had done what that person had told us to do. So sometimes it even leads to harm.
Wow. Yeah, that the mother that I spoke of first, the one whose daughter has intractable seizures, she said that with regard to the strep, coming up all the time, last year her daughter had her tonsils out, and the doctor said, I presume, this will help. Well, knowing her daughter's like sort of cycle of infections as well as she does, mother started seeing the signs and said, just recently, and said, I think that she's contracted strep again. Could you please test for it? And they said, well, no, she doesn't need to be tested for it. That's not what this is. It's got to be something else. The tonsils are gone. And mother pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally they tested, and of course it was strep.
Strep, yeah.
And I said to her, we are not that way. I said, we trust parents' experience of their children, their knowledge of their children, and then finally your gut instinct. And if you come to us and say, this is what I think is going on, we're going to take that very seriously. Yeah. And say, okay, let's look and see if that is, as opposed to trying to prove you wrong, or ignore you, which is, I think, more, the response. But what do you know? You're just a mother.
Yeah, I was speaking to a family, and they were telling me that they were constantly, I think this happens especially after a child is given a diagnosis. Sometimes parents will ask a professional, why does my child have trouble with speaking, or why does my child always want to eat all the time, or why does my child, and fill in the gap. And the answer they just get back is, because your child has Down syndrome, or because your child has autism. And the parent is just struck by it. That is one of the least helpful answers you could have given me, because first of all, it doesn't actually tell me why, right? You're just you probably remember this, Colleen, but my grandfather used to quote someone, you might even remember who originally said it, who said something like, humans are funny. They feel like if they put a name on something, it means they understand it. And so many people, that's autism. That's why he does that, thinking that just because they can point to something, that means they know what it is. And it's like, no. Just because the child has a diagnosis of autism or Down syndrome or epilepsy, why is that seizure occurring? Do you have any idea? Like, do you know why that child, is unable to read or speak or whatever? And they don't most of the time. And that's their throwaway answer to try to avoid the question.
Yeah. Well, when it comes right down to it, I guess it's the difference between looking at someone as a human being, someone who is living a life and who has parents who love them and trying to get answers for them, and sort of, oh, this is a person with autism or a person with Down syndrome. And I'm not I'm not saying anybody intends to not look at them as people, but for people you try to find answers, and help. But just saying, well, it's the diagnosis, sort of shuts that door, I think, for a lot of people. Say, well, that's why, so this is why he does this, or they have
Yeah.
a diagnosis. And unfortunately, that's just what we know, and we just have to live with it. And it's such a limiting
Yeah. And so
idea.
many parents for years try to get their child diagnosed because they're just trying to figure out what's going on. And then the child, after trying to convince professionals for years their child has an issue and them not listening, they finally get a diagnosis. And then the professionals start telling them, well, your child will never do this, this, and this because of the diagnosis. And the parent realizes, wow, I had to fight all this time just to get them to be aware of my child's issues. And now that they are, they're just telling me there's nothing we can do about it. So, all right. Well, Colleen, do you want to tell people how they can get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. So you can email me at info@domaninternational.org, or you can message or call me at country code 1-814-232-8668. I'm on WhatsApp, Telegram. I think I even have Signal on my work phone as well. But we have appointments coming up for families who are thinking this might be the right fit for them, or have more questions about whether or not it's the right fit for you. Please reach out and ask, because we do want to, we're going to get you that information. And our appointments tend to book up about 6 to 8 weeks in advance minimum. So if you're thinking, oh, this is something I'd like to do in the summer, definitely get in touch with me right away, because we're going to run out of spots. There's always more coming in the future, but again, if your personal schedule is looking good for, June, July, August, the time is now.
Absolutely. All right, Colleen, thank you so much.
Thank
Everyone, thanks
you.
for joining. We'll see you here next week at the same time. Bye-bye.
Terrific.